Well, I think first and foremost, we share the fact that we have this 19th, some would say 18th century model of a museum, which is a building where collections have been assembled, both as a focus for curatorial research, but for display to the public. And that since many of the world's museums have been created, the world's great museums that have these encyclopedic collections, the world has completely changed. How people get their information has changed, how people learn and are educated has changed, how people travel has changed. And I think for me, whenever I speak to directors of other museums, we're all thinking about how we adapt and change and remodel what we're doing so that it's relevant for a 21st century audience. I think, following on from that, the challenge that we share is not just how the world has changed, but now the amount of time people might have and the competition for people's attention is very great, and how we can simply be visible in a world that is now increasingly driven online. And the great example I give of this is something like TripAdvisor. 10 years ago, TripAdvisor didn't exist, and it probably won't exist in another 10 years. But right now, if somebody's coming to visit Toronto, they're very likely to go on TripAdvisor, have a look to see what the things are that you can see and do when you're there. And if a museum such as the ROM doesn't appear in the top 5, they won't come and see us. They won't know that we're one of the main reasons to be here. Whereas 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a guidebook would have had a much slower rate of turnover and would have actually put across that information. So these are just simple things, but they fundamentally change the way that we have to behave as museums. The last thing I'd say is that I think for all museums, there is a conversation going on right now in 2013, 2014 about the role of the curator. And I think the interesting thing about that is that there's always been a conversation about the role of the curator. It's just that it remains with us now, and it's something that we're all thinking about. To what extent do we have people who are the powerhouses of knowledge for our collections? To what extent do they have the responsibility for interpreting those collections to the public, as well as researching into those collections? To what extent do they maybe have teaching responsibilities? How do they interact with their colleagues, and what do they do? And I think that's something where I think that with the growth of online over the next few years, I think we might finally see museums become the kind of knowledge organisations that we've always aspired to be, where we have this wonderful knowledge that our staff contain, but it doesn't walk out of the door when they do. And instead we have a way of really fundamentally retaining it and continuing to interpret things for our visitors.